NAYGN, North American Young Generation in Nuclear. So we are a professional development organization that is all about making sure that the next generation of those in the nuclear industry, interested in the nuclear industry, have the tools and resources that they need to thrive and succeed within the industry. Also, next generation with nuclear technology and everything that's happening in the nuclear industry, and educating people also on nuclear, the benefits of nuclear, educating the community, educating government officials, and just making sure we're involved in the community as much as possible. And as far as, going into schools, teaching kids about engineering and nuclear and all of the different aspects of the nuclear industry. We talked about earlier, why aren't, young girls interested in nuclear? It's like, we want to change that.
Just because the facts are A, if the narrative is B and everyone believes the narrative, then B is what matters. But it's our job in our industry to speak up proudly, soberly, and to engage people in this dialogue. Those 2.5 billion people that are in energy poverty, they need us.
America cannot meet this threat alone.
If there is a single country,
of course, the world cannot meet it without America,
that is willing to
we're going to need you, the next generation, to finish the
overhaul
job.
nuclear regulation,
We need scientists to design new fuels.
focus on net public
We
benefit
need engineers to invent new technologies. We
over absurd levels of radiation
need
protection,
entrepreneurs to sell those technologies.
then we will march towards this.
We need workers to operate assembly lines that hum with high-tech, zero-carbon
We have
components.
unlimited prosperity for all humans.
We need diplomats and businessmen and women and Peace Corps volunteers to help developing nations skip past the dirty phase of development and transition to sustainable sources of energy. In other words, we need you.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the Fire Division podcast. On this podcast, we talk about energy-dense fuels and how they can better human lives. Our guest today is Sarah Davis. She's a safety analysis engineer, and she also volunteers for North American Young Generation in Nuclear, or as known in the industry by their acronym, NAYGN. She serves on the board and she leads up their DEI committee. And that's the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Whenever I hear that, I think DIY, which is not the same, although kind of.
We're starting from the ground up, for sure.
Right? Yeah, starting from the ground up. So, Sarah, I'm super excited to chat with you today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Excited to talk about nuclear and my role and NAYGN. Any excuse that I get to talk about NAYGN and our work that we're doing is just a great day. It starts my morning off great. So really excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'm excited to learn about your background and about your career in NAYGN. Let's start with your background. Where did you go to school? How did you get involved with nuclear? Start from the beginning.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, and I went to University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Go Vols. That's I like to throw my Go Vols in there. And I got my bachelor's and master's degrees in nuclear engineering from UT. And so UT has this great, amazing 4+1 program. So you are able to take master's electives your senior year and then just finish your master's in a year, which is great. But
did you do a course base or write a thesis? I did the same thing at CU with mechanical. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's a great thing that colleges do. Yeah, I did a non-thesis path, but it was writing a thesis. It just wasn't published, basically, is what they did. Yeah. So it was building a new building for nuclear and their first year engineering classes. And so in the basement of the new building, they were building a research reactor. So non-critical,
awesome.
Fast thermal coupled subcritical research reactor. And so that was part of my master's thesis, was just optimizing that. The doctoral student was using AI to try and figure out the best configuration. And so then I would take his AI and basically optimize it and see what the neutron flux that it put out and things like that. And then also some safety requirements that were needed based on the configuration that we were looking at. So super cool project. I really enjoyed my time at UT. Couldn't say better things about their nuclear program. But I didn't know that I wanted to go into nuclear. Young girls aren't like, ooh, I want to be a nuclear engineer. So,
which is wrong, right? We should change this. I've got two
Exactly.
nieces and I send them science kits for every one of their birthdays, whether they want them or want. or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. And so that's definitely something that we can get into later with NAYGN. But I didn't know I wanted to be a nuclear. I liked math and I liked science a lot growing up. And so in high school, I took calculus and physics, and my physics teacher was really the one who pushed. And she's like, if you like physics, if you like this, you should look into engineering. And I was like, oh, I never thought about that. Yeah, that sounds great. And so I went into college with an idea of, okay, I want to be an engineer. I applied for the College of Engineering and got in, but didn't really have a path yet. And so then, as part of our first year curriculum in the first semester, they do a departmental fair. So you have to go, it's for a homework grade, but you have to go talk to at least 3 departments and write down 3 fun facts you figured out about each department and whatever. So I had an idea that I wanted to be a biomedical engineer because my dad had double knee replacements. And so the idea of creating cobalt knees or some stuff was really cool. So that's the first table I went to. I went to the biomedical table, and I went up and they had a TV screen on their table that was showing a surgery, and immediately was like, oh wait, I'm the queasiest person I know. I can't do this. So I was like,
I had
well,
a similar experience. Yeah. Well, my
yeah.
sister became a dentist, one of my sisters, and I remember she got back from her sophomore year and started describing the anatomy class, which I won't go into detail because we'll both vomit. And I was like, I don't really need to be a doctor. Physics is good. I like this.
Physics is good. Yeah, I can stay away from the human body as
Yeah.
much as I physically can. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was not happy about it.
Yeah.
So then I was like, well, plan B, let's actually look at these departments and see what interests me, what's good, what's out there. And so I went to a couple and then went to the nuclear table. And I like to say that nuclear is either very interesting or he was just a really good salesman, because immediately I was like, oh, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I'll brag on my university that they had some great research fields. They're doing a lot in security. And it was just so interesting to hear about everything that was going on within the department and that you could focus on. And so I just got hooked and I was like, all right, this is it. So changed my major the next week and have been in nuclear and just grown. I didn't know a lot at the beginning, and I'm still learning more and more and more. And it's just the more I learn, the more excited I am to be in the industry. And yeah, and so I've really enjoyed my time so far. So yeah, and then I stayed for an extra year, got my master's in nuclear engineering, and then went to work. So
Nice. I think it's remarkable how many students have a similar experience where they meet perhaps a charismatic department chair that sells them on the degree, and they're like, well, and I even had a similar experience. I was touring the physics building at the university that I went to freshman year, and then meandered over to the mechanical engineering department. And I remember the department chair was like, well, mechanical engineers do everything that physicists do, but they tend to make a lot more money. And I was like, wow, sold.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to dive in. I didn't expect to talk to you about this, but an area of interest of ours is research reactors and reactors on campuses. So, do
Mhm.
you mind describing kind of what the fast reactor was? You said it wasn't critical, subcritical. So maybe talk about
Yeah.
what that means and why it was a fast reactor. But then I'm also curious on, and it's okay if you don't know the stats, but like reactors and research reactors across the country. Are there a bunch of them? What's the power level? Are there any producing heat? If there's any background, we didn't prep you for this, so it's okay if you don't know the answers, but just
No,
help. Maybe we haven't talked about it on the show yet, so it could be helpful for the audience to hear it from somebody that's actually been involved with one.
yeah, for sure. So I know that there are a few, definitely not a lot compared to our full
Our
reactor
gigawatt
size.
fleet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Based on the nuclear fleet in the United States, there are several, but they're definitely not a ton. The one at UT, because I left very early on in the process of putting that together, I really don't know where they're at right now in terms. I know the building was built and there are now students there, but I don't know how far along the reactor has gone. So at UT, it was a fast thermal coupled subcritical reactor. So partially fast, partially thermal in the configuration, and then subcritical research reactor. So subcritical is K effective equals 1. That's our critical. That means that the neutrons being created and destroyed are equal. So
Right.
1. And so
Or perhaps created and lost, right? Meaning
lost, sorry, not destroyed.
Yeah.
And so subcritical is going to be less than 1. So you are losing more neutrons than you are creating them, which
the reaction's not self-sustaining. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I don't know, for your audience purposes, don't know how much everybody's aware.
I don't need it. It's a total different level, and I'm too deep in it now to remember. So I have to
remember.
take a
Yeah,
step back
exactly. So supercritical is above 1. It's where you're creating more, or more reactions are happening than you're losing. And so that's when we get into areas that we don't particularly love sometimes. So subcritical, you're able to control it. You're still getting the neutrons you need, the radiation you need for research purposes, but you're not creating heat, you're not creating energy for electricity purposes or anything like that. So it's great from a research perspective. I think personally that universities should really look into it if possible, because another great thing that I was able to do my junior year of college is that I was able to study abroad in Prague at the Prague Technical University over my
That's
summer.
amazing. Want to
Yeah.
go to Prague?
It incredible. 10 out of 10. If you have a chance, go. We were able to go to Prague and then visit Vienna and the IAEA while we were there. And so just an unbelievable experience. But at Prague Technical Institute, excuse me, they had a research reactor. So we did our lab class, basically our senior year lab class, we were able to do with an actual research reactor. So we were able to look at void within the reactor and see whether it's inside versus outside and how that affects K effective. And it was it was really my first time being like, oh wait, I understand what's going on, because in nuclear you have so much theory, right? And so
Yeah.
you can think of an idea or think of the theory and be like, okay, I understand sort of what's happening like physically on a physics concept, but then to actually see it happening and see, oh, our K effective is going up, our K effective is going down. Oh, I'm finally like putting it all together, putting the pieces together. And so it was a very like, oh, okay, I understand what's happening now. I was a little lost maybe earlier, but so
I think that happens a lot in physics and science and chemistry, where it requires a certain level of imagination to internalize and conceptualize a lot of these theories, because the technology isn't obvious. Even like things that are mechanical that you can see, it takes time to understand how the components move together and the nuance behind them. And then things like chemistry, where reactions just happen, or God forbid, electrical engineering, it's a total black box.
Electrical engineering to me
electricity,
is a foreign language. Oh man, applaud them, really.
Yeah, that's very smart people. But no, so that's super interesting. So
Yeah.
the thermal versus neutron piece, or fast piece, like what do you mean by fast and what do you mean by thermal?
So thermal and fast is it kind of sounds like how fast the neutrons are moving, but that's not the case. When you're looking at your graphs of energy,
They all move pretty fast, presumably at the speed of light, right? Like,
right, exactly. So
Yeah.
it's based on your energy of the neutrons themselves. So your fast neutrons are going to be your higher energy neutrons, and your thermal neutrons are going to be your lower energy neutrons. So chance of creating reactions is higher or lower based on where you are in the configuration of the core. And so it was split up into 3 different parts. And so there were 2 thermal sections and 1 fast section, at least when I was working on it. Again, I don't know if they changed some details or things like that, but when I was working on the reactor, that's how it was set up. So your thermal neutrons are moving slower, I'll use quotes,
Sure.
less energy. And so, sorry, this is where we'll stop because I messed up. Because I have not been to theory in forever, I'm switching on what has a higher probability of hitting versus lower probability of hitting. And I want to say thermal has a higher probability than fast, but for some reason my brain is telling me that I'm going to sound like an idiot if I say that.
Nope, no worries. We'll put a link to the Theory 101. We didn't prep you that you're gonna have a pop quiz on your master's studies, and don't know how long ago that
Yeah,
was.
no worries, no
If
worries.
if it were me, I've slept since then, so I would definitely get it wrong and get it mixed up. So
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm
um,
not saying the
but
wrong thing.
totally. But I think the point to highlight here is that lots of universities across the country have research reactors. They have nuclear material. It's operated safely. It's really useful, and they have essentially very young people or young professionals operating it. Right? So I don't know. I think it's a fun thing to highlight when people are worried about potentially the safety case. This is a great example of why it can be so safe, especially at small scales.
Yeah, absolutely. And I highly recommend to any university, if they're thinking about it, do it if it's possible.
Yeah. Okay, so let's chat a little bit about your career. What kind of projects have you worked on? Safety analysis engineer. What does a safety analysis engineer do?
Yeah, so after I graduated with my master's, I went into the job that I currently have now, which is safety analysis engineer for a engineering consulting firm. And so basically what I do is I do calculations and different analysis for safety related components and safety related systems throughout the nuclear power plant. So just making sure that our nuclear fleet is going to be safe. So, a great thing about being part of a consulting firm is that I am able to work with all of the different plants and utilities across the country, which is such a great experience. Especially when I'm just getting out of college and I'm really getting into the nuclear industry, is I'm able to see how different utilities operate, different procedures, policies, how everything works. And so you have such a broad knowledge of what's going on in the industry, which I think is great and very useful, especially starting your career. And so I mainly do dose calculations. So making sure that dose to components or dose to people during different outages or different tasks that need to be done, mission dose and stuff like that are all safe and able to survive within the nuclear plant life and things like that. And then also a main part of my job is that I focus on environmental qualification, which is EQ. And so to bring it back a little bit, when I was in college at University of Tennessee, I was able to intern at Oak Ridge National Lab, ORNL. So that was another awesome experience, is that he is so close to one of our national labs. There's only a few. And to have that intern experience at ORNL was just incredible. But I focused on environmental qualification at ORNL from the testing side of things, from the research side of things. So, environmental qualification, for anybody who doesn't know, is essentially making sure that your component can survive in the plant, or figure out how long it can survive in the plant based on temperature, pressure, radiation, humidity, those kinds of attributes of the plant. And so seeing their qualified life, seeing how long they can last in a reactor or in a plant.
So when you say environment, or environment used in this context, is the operating environment actually within the plant, not necessarily the surrounding site environment or elsewhere, but yeah, for component qualification.
Correct. Yeah. So the environment of the room or the area that it is in. So yeah, temperature, pressure, radiation, humidity, things like that. And so at ORNL, I was doing thermal aging of different power plant cables. And at the time, I was like, oh, this is interesting, but is cables going to be a huge part of my nuclear engineering world? And then I got out of college.
Cables like electrical cables and
Yeah.
transmission and communications. Okay.
Right, electrical cables, yeah. And then I got into my job now, and I'm like, oh yeah, I look at cables and valves and limit switches and transmitters and so many different components. And so I was just thinking dose, radiation, I don't know. And so
That's fascinating. I've got lots of questions.
yeah, for sure, go for it.
Let's start with the dose component. Dose to me is still confusing. I've heard this many times. I've researched it, but there's just radiation in general can be a mystifying phenomena.
Mhm.
Can you maybe give just a 101 over the difference between total dose and dose rate, and perhaps how is that different?
Yeah, so your total dose, and I'll talk about it in terms of a nuclear plant. And so
Okay.
even the word total dose has a few layers to it.
There's nuance. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually. So, in a plant, you have your normal operation that you are typically expecting for the plant to go. And then you also have your post accident. So if there were something to happen, like a LOCA, loss of coolant accident, or a high energy line break, or something like that, then you have your post accident dose. And so those two things are going to be different, just depending on uh, what you're expecting at normal operations. And so your total dose for a nuclear plant is going to be actually called your total integrated dose. So your total dose over time includes your normal operating dose, what you would see for however long your plant is licensed for, 20, 40, 60 years. And then any post-accident dose that you may see if something were to happen at your plant. So the plants account for basically everything, right? Your normal operating, and also if there was an accident to happen, what you would see in that accident. And that's what you look at as your TID, we call it total integrated dose. And so that's over, again, your full license. And then dose rate is what you're going to see. I usually see it per hour. So you'll see in an area, because these are all, like we said earlier, separated. The environment is the environment you're seeing in the operating space. You'll see your dose rate of dose per hour. So rads or rems or millirems per hour. And so that is also something interesting, is that different plants use different radiation units depending on the IC rads per hour, which is your standard radiation unit measurement. But then if you're looking, let's say, at a mission dose, so a dose that somebody might receive if they have to go into a certain area of the plant, you'll see millisieverts or millirem depending on the different utility. So that's something that I
Have you looked at the history and why there's so many different measurements,
because
or we'll say units?
the people don't like to agree, and I'm just like,
I
can
know.
we
Yeah.
can we all just get along?
Americans use feet and everyone else uses meters, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And that is something that college prepared you for too, is that we always used meters and kilograms and all that
SI
stuff.
units,
And
yeah.
yeah, SI units. And we still do that in calculation space too, because it just makes way more sense.
Good for you guys. In oil and gas, we use archaic units that are ridiculous, like a barrel. How much is a barrel?
Oh my God. Have you seen the trend going on is that Americans will use anything but the metric system and just have like
Yep.
yeah. Yeah, it's great.
It's hilarious. So while you're describing it, I guess an analogy that came to mind was perhaps to super simplify it for people, the difference between distance and velocity. So meaning the total integrated dose might be the distance that you've gone,
Mhm.
if we're using a length and speed analogy, and then the dose rates, how fast you're getting to the total distance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah. So I mainly look at total dose, and then I check just to make sure that the dose rate looks
Right.
normal and something I would expect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. Because, well, everyone agrees that radiation above a certain level is highly dangerous.
Correct.
will,
Yes.
will kill you and will cause cancer. Just like gravity above a certain height is very dangerous.
It's
We all
just,
agree on
yeah.
that. But yeah,
Yeah.
below a certain threshold, it's okay. So,
Hmm.
and when you're looking at certain components, and perhaps this is too specific of a question, but how many components within the plant get irradiated, and do they remain radioactive over what amount of time? Is it
Oh
just
my
highly
goodness.
variable?
Right now I'm doing one project and I'm looking at solenoid valves, and there's 200 and something solenoid valves just in harsh areas. And so I
Meaning areas
truly,
close to the reactor or close to
yeah,
radioactive material that is
yeah.
irradiating, and yeah.
So I can't even like I can't even estimate how many components that we would be looking at. But for radiation and radioactive components, the plant is split up into harsh and mild environments. And so harsh environments have a certain threshold based on the plant's technical specifications and different regulatory guides in the industry give holds for harsh and mild environments. So your harsh environments are going to be where you see higher temperatures, higher pressures, higher radiation values. And so those components are what we say are in the environmental qualification program, EQ program. So those components have to be evaluated and analyzed for all of those aspects and making sure that they can survive in the in the plant. And then you have your mild components, which have that lower threshold of you're not going to see higher temperature values and radiation values and things like that. So I think you would mainly probably focus on the harsh environment components, but still I think of components are are within that area. So it's a lot. It takes a village, right?
Yeah. Now I'm going to throw you a curveball. Have you contemplated the difference in radiation levels in a nuclear power plant versus a coal power plant?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I haven't looked at that specifically, but when we're looking at radiation levels and how much certain things give off radiation, it always surprises me from a public information point of view as we're
Like everything's
teaching.
radioactive. Not everything, but
Everything's
like almost
basically
everything.
basically everything is radioactive. Like you
Yeah.
get as much radiation from eating a banana, from the potassium that's in a banana, as you would being close to a radio or like a nuclear plant for over a year or something. I don't know if that's the actual comparison, but like it,
Order of magnitude. I think you're
yeah.
on the right page.
Yeah, so it's just crazy to be like, oh, well, they're probably not hugely. If I had to guess before I looked into the research of it, I wouldn't think that they were drastically different.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll challenge you with this, right? Or have you on again and let you do a little bit of research for it.
Right. I'll bring the facts. Yeah. But
Well, because that's that's the thing that I'm
Mhm.
always interested in is what's the cost benefit trade-off, right? Meaning like, are we being hypersensitive about how much we're protecting for this energy source, meaning nuclear, and undersensitive or care less about this other energy source, other means of producing energy?
Yeah, and you look at there's trade-offs, right? Okay. You might have certain radiation levels living within a mile of the plant, but nuclear industry is so regulated that those levels have to be point like 0.1% of non-safe activities that you do on a daily basis, right? The chance of you dying from radiation have to be just ridiculously low levels compared to all of these other things that we do. And B, your coal plant, how else is it affecting you with other
Yeah.
carcinogens or pollution? And
Which, yeah, I think if the NRC was able to take a holistic view and analyze, and in their mission, they say reasonable assurance of adequate public health and safety, and
right.
that if they were able to take a true cost benefit analysis and look at other energy generation sources, then my guess, and I don't know, I think this is what we should do, but is that their level of restrictions would be much lower. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
yeah.
just it's okay. Yeah, coal might not give off certain radiation values that you would see in a nuclear plant, but what
I think you might be
what
surprised. I
else?
think the exhaust plume actually has quite a bit. Like on some, it depends on the coal, we'll say. But
Yeah, yeah. No, and I bet it is. I wouldn't if I had to put an educated guess down, I would say that they're not drastically different.
Nice. Maybe we can dig into that on another episode. That'd be really fun.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that gives me good perspective on kind of your background, your career. So safety analysis engineer, that's awesome. But let's dig a little bit into your volunteer work. So NAYGN, North American Young Generation Nuclear. What is this organization? How did it start? Give us some background on it. What's mission? What's the goals? Yeah.
Yeah, so NAYGN, like you said, a North American Young Generation in Nuclear. So we are a professional development organization that is all about making sure that the next generation of those in the nuclear industry, interested in the nuclear industry, have the tools and resources that they need to thrive and succeed within the industry. And also, there are, I think, a couple different ways to shift it. Also, next generation with nuclear technology and everything that's happening in the nuclear industry, and educating people also on nuclear, the benefits of nuclear, educating the community, educating government officials, and just making sure we're involved in the community as much as possible. So those are kind of the key highlights of NAYGN. It was founded or started in 1999, so it's been around for a little bit now. And it's such a great organization for those in the nuclear industry to get involved with. There are pillars that we focus on. Again, broad strokes, what I described, but knowledge transfer is one of them, where we like to say in my NAYGN chapter, the more seasoned professionals in the industry can share their knowledge, lessons learned, what's happened, how their path in the nuclear industry, all of that. Networking, being able to network and connect with everybody else in the nuclear industry. It's not huge. So making those connections is so great. And you absolutely run into everybody again, whether you're at conferences or events, community events, things like that. Public information. So again, just educating the public, educating government officials, advocating for nuclear. And outreach as far as going into schools. We talked about earlier, why aren't young girls interested in nuclear? It's like, we want to change that. Going into schools, teaching kids about engineering and nuclear and all of the different aspects of the nuclear industry. And we have children's books that we've written also to engage children with that. And hopefully within the next little bit, we'll also have a DEI pillar. So that's my role, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it is a focus of NAYGN right now, but just making sure that our industry is as inclusive and diverse as possible. Diverse people create diverse thoughts and just make the industry, I think, and the world a better place. So that's the general overview of NAYGN, but great organization, and I am so happy to be a part of it for sure.
Now, is there kind of a national chapter or main chapter? And do chapters function independently? And which one are you involved with?
Yeah, so all of it. So how it's set up, so it is across Canada, the United States, and Mexico. We have a international board of directors, and so those positions, I believe there are a few positions in the board of directors.
They're the head honchos.
Yeah. There's the vice president, past president, communications, technology, US and Canadian operating officers, public information officer, and diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, and treasurer, and professional development officer. We got it all down. So those positions, those are the board of directors for the NAYGN as a whole, as a body. And then it's split up into chapters. So each utility or each company, vendor, supplier, consulting firm, university, each entity is going to have its own NAYGN chapter. So they focus on the pillars in their area at their company and report to the board of directors, like I said, and for like metrics and things like that, and these procedures. And then also split up into regions. So we have Canada as one whole region. And I know that's very broad because Canada is a huge place, but we have Canada as a region. And then the US is split up into different regions like Southeast, West. The Carolinas has their own region because nuclear is so prominent there. And so it's split up that way. And then Mexico has one chapter as well. And so within the regions, the different chapters of the regions connect throughout the year based on they can get together for different social events or different community events and things like that. And then once a year, we have an annual conference where all of the chapters from all across North America get together and come together for a few days of just full NAYGN conference, professional development, soft skills, networking,
And does
public
the
information
conference happen at the
events.
same time every year? Is it, I think it's June, right?
Yeah, so this year it's going to be in June. It's actually our first standalone conference as NAYGN. So beforehand, we partnered with NEI, the Nuclear Energy Institute, and we worked together on the NEA. There's lots of acronyms in the nuclear industry.
Yeah,
So
that's
sorry.
crazy.
But so the NEA was the nuclear or is the Nuclear Energy Assembly. And so NAYGN just always had a hand in helping with that conference. But this year we decided that our membership is strong after COVID. This is something that we wanted to do and try to see if we could have a successful standalone conference. And so this year we're trying it out. It's our first one. And I'm so excited about it. I think it's going to be great. But we're gonna.
Yeah, I looked at the agenda. You guys have a great agenda of speakers and topics that you're going to cover. And
Yeah.
I think this point should be highlighted, right? This is young generation nuclear in North America, and you guys feel like you have enough membership and momentum to actually have your own conference and host it and put it on yourselves. And that what does that say about the industry with the growth and the interest in young people and people getting involved? Like I think this is important, right?
Yeah. No, it's I just am like beaming with excitement about it just because
Yeah.
exactly. It's so important. It shows that the interest in the industry is growing. I know that there's been waves throughout history of popularity of nuclear and whatnot, but now we're basically at an all-time high, especially with just support in general of nuclear. And so the fact that we have enough momentum, we have enough membership, people are excited, we have people like wanting to speak at the conference, people are trying to get in to be speakers at the conference. It's so exciting and just shows if this is the trajectory of the nuclear industry. I am so excited that I jumped in when I did, because I think it's just going to continue to grow and get better. And I know I'm part of the young generation. I'm a young millennial. I'm on the young end of the millennial spectrum, but the more I see the even younger generation get involved, it just makes me so excited because they're so smart and they want to save the world. And being involved with NAYGN definitely makes me see that a lot. So I am just so pumped for this conference. It is June 21st through the 23rd in Minneapolis. So if anybody wants to come, registration's opened. It's going to be great. So excited about it.
Excellent. So it's a nonprofit, I assume, NAYGN.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay. And are you guys mostly member funded? Are there dues that people pay into, or are there donors? What's the structure of that?
Yeah, so it is free. It's a free organization. There are no member dues or member costs. We are a nonprofit, but we do have sponsors. And so different companies can have different sponsorship levels and donations as well. And so with over 100 chapters, active chapters, and over 6,000 members, the fact that it's free is great.
Oh, that's helpful for people young in their career, right? They may not be making as much money, but then I assume the benefit to sponsors is they get exposure with those people and get their brand recognized, right? These are going to be the up and coming leaders of the nuclear industry in the future. So if you want to reach them and develop brand recognition and promote your products, right? You can.
Right. They have we definitely show them on our website. We talk about them with all of our announcements and things and communications. We always thank our sponsors and want to show that we are very thankful for them and how they fund us and help us do what we want to do and do what we think is important. And I think also to them, they want to invest in an organization that really, I believe, is helping the industry in all different ways. And so to put your money back into an organization that does that, I think really helps you as a company. It helps your business fundamentals and all of that. So we're very, very thankful for our sponsors, and they absolutely allow us to do all of the good that we try and do in in North America. So
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Okay, so you're on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, or you've helped stand up that pillar, it sounds like,
Mhm.
for the organization. What is this? Why is it important? I know it's been in the news a lot. People talk about it a lot, but why did you guys think that this was important to bring to nuclear? Notwithstanding, I'll just preface, when I look at all the old pictures of nuclear, it's all just a bunch of white guys in lab coats, like building stuff. And that's
Yeah.
okay. Well, this probably isn't very diverse and not very representative of what the industry actually looks like. So
Right. So, yeah, so to break it down a little bit, so I am the inaugural Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Board of Directors. So it is the first term of this position, and so I'm very, very glad and thankful that I was elected to be in this role. So this role was started back in, or it was decided on back in 2020. COVID was happening after the murder of George Floyd and the real height of the social injustice that was happening over that summer. NAYGN took an introspective look and said, "Oh wow, as a development organization that reaches out to the community, that's so involved in so many different ways in the community, this is something that we need to talk about. This is something that we need to focus on. And let's take a look in, is our organization diverse and inclusive?" And so they thought, okay, we need to focus on this area. So the Diversity and Inclusion Committee was created. They put out some communication in the newsletter, and I saw that and was immediately like, yes, I want to join. DEI is definitely a passion of mine. I am a Latino woman in the nuclear industry, so it is definitely something that is very close. So join the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And then with that, they announced the new board position that was being created in the 2021 elections, board of director elections. And so after being involved with the DEI committee for a little bit, I ran for that position and got that in the summer of 2021. And so the main focus really of the DEI committee and having this role is, again, to make sure that NAYGN is as diverse and inclusive as we want the nuclear industry to look, and making sure that everybody in North America feels welcomed and feels like they have the tools and resources that they can join the nuclear industry and that they can thrive in the nuclear industry. Making sure that voices are heard from the marginalized groups. You did mention that there might be a lack of racial and gender demographics within the industry. And so that's not what North America looks like. That's not what North America is. So to have an industry that isn't reflective of the community is something that we need to work on. And I think having diverse backgrounds, people tend to think of diversity as just race and gender, or ethnicity and gender. And those are absolutely two very, very key components of what that looks like. But I think also in a broader sense, it touches a lot more areas of the nuclear industry and NAYGN. So making sure when we make our decisions for NAYGN, okay, how is this going to affect our different regions? We have diverse regions, Canada versus Mexico versus the Southeast, West, things like that. And just, it's so much broader than what people try and put it in a box as. And so I think NAYGN has done a good job so far. I would hope as that is my role.
like, I'm in charge. I feel like I've done a good job. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've done well, but part of our plan, our strategic plan, and just for the organization, is making sure we've partnered with different organizations to put on various diverse events, such as we had for National Coming Out Day in October. We partnered with OSTEM, which is Out in STEM organization, to do out in the workplace panel. And so just talking about what that process was like for people and what it's like to be out in the workplace. We did a microaggressions webinar with Dr. Angel Jones, who is just phenomenal if you have the chance to look her up. microaggressions for Black History Month webinar. And so putting on various webinars and events and to highlight certain groups and ideas, and then also making sure at our conferences, our regional conferences and our annual conference, that we have diverse speakers and we have diverse topics as well. So I know lots of people in the industry would like to just hear technical topics on SMRs and the new AP
But that's not the
1000.
biggest problem facing the industry, right? The biggest problem is the regulatory constraints and getting stuff approved, which comes down to being a people problem.
Right, exactly. And
And
so,
so like I don't know, that's where I come from with the view. It's notwithstanding, right? I definitely support diversity, equity, inclusion, and it's awesome. And I think that we should have diverse people in every profession and skill set. And but it's like this is, if we want to better human lives and build more nuclear and use this technology to our advantage, we have to be able to get along and agree on ideas.
you're right.
So if you're not understanding everyone that's involved in the conversation, which with a topic like nuclear is the world,
Right.
then you need to reach out to them and get on their level and actually say, hey, how can I meet you where you're at, right? And understand more about who everyone is. So I think it's awesome that you guys include it. So
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about it. I think even just within NAYGN as a whole, it's a great like feeder of DE&I, just having the different regions, like being involved with Canada, the US, and Mexico, because you can see that
so diverse.
it's so diverse. Exactly. And just like even like the geological repository conversation, which is so important, right?
Yeah.
So for those members who don't know, the plan was, when nuclear power plants were started up, is that the federal government would decide on a location to put the nuclear fuel, the spent fuel that has been in the reactor, that they would have a place of storage for all of the plants to send their fuel that has been used to this storage facility. And so that has been promised and promised and promised and has not come to light in the United States. But Canada is basically deciding on their geological repository right now, and that's definitely moving forward for them. So to be able to see the differences there, diversity of thought, diversity of policies and procedures, again, DEI is it can touch so many things, right? And so just seeing that conversation is so important. And to your point of understanding where people are coming from and people's thought processes, so that we can agree on the best case scenario. I think it's important to see how other people do it too. So hopefully we can bring that here to the States.
I like that. Another way to say it might be, it provides folks an opportunity to learn from others and do thought experiments that maybe they hadn't done previously in their communities, but just think about a different way of solving technical or social problems.
Yeah.
How do you see this transforming over time, and maybe more broadly, the nuclear industry changing in the coming years?
I think we touched on it earlier, just with the upcoming generation of those in nuclear, just so passionate about changing the world and environmental education. That is,
well, the youngest environmentalists that are coming to environmentalism with an open mind are all for nuclear.
exactly.
They look at the facts objectively and they're like, this makes the most sense. Baby boomers are crazy. Why are we doing this way, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's been so surrounded by fear just because of these events. And so to have the young generation have an open mind and open perspective, like, oh, we can just look on the table, look at the fact sheet and see that this is the way to go, right? Especially with all of our regulatory and safety requirements that we have. Like, nuclear is one of the answers, right, to the climate change. And I think that's the hottest topic as far as what is society, what is the world going to look like in the next 20, 30 years. And so the young generation knows that. They know, oh, this is going to be our problem and we have to figure it out, right? And so working together, I think, with clean energy, I don't want it to be a competition, right? I think that we need all forms of clean energy to be able to come at this climate change, right? Am I biased towards nuclear? Yes, I will. I won't hide that. I think nuclear is great with the
we're biased. This podcast is biased, right? We open with
Okay.
energy dense fuels are the way to save the world. So we think,
Right.
yeah, we think nuclear is the only thing that can displace oil and gas, and we even like oil and gas. We think it's good for humanity.
Yeah, right. And so
Yeah.
with the efficiency of nuclear, like I absolutely think the investment needs to be there. But I am excited about it. We're seeing new advanced technology. We're seeing SMRs and micro reactors. Can those be retrofitted to coal plants and old nuclear fleets, or old, that have maybe been decommissioned? And just seeing all of the advancement strides with fusion that are happening. I can't even fathom like what that is going to look like in X number of years, but just the idea that we're one step closer in that area. I think the technology is there, the interest is there, the momentum is there. So in the next 5 to 10 years of nuclear, I know some things happen pretty slowly in the nuclear industry, but
We can change. We're
which
working
we
on it. We
can
can change that.
change. Exactly. The next 10 years or so, next 10, 20, 30 years, I think I'm really excited to see how much growth there really is in the industry, because I think we have all of the key components that we need to absolutely make an impact.
Absolutely.
Going,
Well, this actually brings me. We're coming up on our time, so
yeah, for
I'll
sure.
shortcut to kind of our last two questions. And meaning, sorry, my last question for you is, what's the most impactful action that we can take, I'll say, as a society or an industry, to ensure that we can build more nuclear? So I asked that question first, but an impactful thing that comes to mind, which I want to preface it with, is this children's book that you guys wrote. Awesome. Educating young minds, getting people up to speed.
Mhm.
So I have one prequel question to the final question, which is, if a donor wanted to come in and buy a bunch of these books and distribute them and take them to schools around the country, how would they do that?
Great, great. I love it. So we actually have 3 children's books available
Oh,
on, yeah.
brilliant.
So 3 children's books, and we want to continue to make them because I think that overall the answer to my question is education, but I'll dive into that a little bit. So
Nice.
with the children's books, that's absolutely the goal: educating young people, educating children with the nuclear industry. We are a nonprofit, so our books are available online as PDF versions of the books. We do have
For free.
several, yes, for free on
Ah,
NAYGN.org.
glorious.
You may have to be a member to access them.
Okay.
So there's one of your free memberships right there. Just log on. They are available, but we do have hard copies of them that we donate to schools and things like that. But we are a nonprofit organization, so we don't make money off of our books, but they are available if you're a school or something and would like a book. Feel free to reach out to me. I don't know how I can throw my information in the little notes of the,
Yeah, we can try to put it in the show notes.
yeah, but it's DEI@NAYGN.org. Send me an email and we can, if we have any available, absolutely. But I think overall, the education component is so important. I think people are worried about nuclear just because they don't really understand it, or they think it's scary, or they're not quite sure. They've heard of 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl or something like that, right? And they're like, oh, nuclear's bad. And if there is something that we see as normal at a nuclear plant that a media source might take and say, oh, look how scary this is. And then people freak out. And it's like, wait, no, it's actually not. Let me educate
Yeah.
you. So I think as an organization, as an industry, the most important thing that we can do is educate our community, educate our friends and our family members and our government officials that are voting on these bills and legislation for license renewals and geological repositories and things like that. Just making sure everybody has the correct information that they need to know that nuclear is the right choice for climate change, for clean energy, for net zero. I think
Yeah.
the more we can do that as an organization, as a society, the better off we'll be. Like we touched on earlier, the better understanding that we'll have of each other, and overall just making sure that we're all on the same playing field, and then we can go from there, right? So that's what I'll leave everybody with is, if you're interested in nuclear, if that's a passion of yours, if you like nuclear, go tell your friends, go tell your family, go tweet about it, go do what you can to educate as many people as possible to try and just, the ball is rolling with nuclear. It's just, I think we have all of the
Let's keep
components.
it rolling.
Let's keep it rolling. Exactly. So
Yeah. Sarah Davis, thanks so much for your time. Couldn't end on a better note than that.
yeah, thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.